Hello, my name is Ciritical, and I have a confession to make. I love games. Big surprise, right? I mean, I've been playing games since I got my first PlayStation and played through Final Fantasy VII, and since I was like an avid fantasy fan anyway, I really had no choice in hell. But there are many reasons for why I love games. I mean, they're great distractions and they're immersive experiences that allows me to escape my day. But they also tell stories, build worlds, and make some amazing characters that you totally fall in love with. Games are captivating. And recently I started asking why that is. I mean, when I was an MMORPG player, it was about the community and the story we developed. It was about friendship, especially with the EVE Online community and the amazing people there. But with my illness kind of making games I can't pause difficult, I've discovered single player games again, and with it, amazing stories that's in them. So why are games so effective as a storytelling format? Simple. They're interactive. You're not watching the story unfold, or you're not reading and imagining it. You're part of the story. Even in the most linear FPS, you're in control of the character. You have the gun in your hand. You choose to shoot, to kill, to spare. I mean, all of these decisions are yours. Games are empowering and compelling for this reason. The story is your story. I mean, with games becoming more and more immersive and compelling in terms of storytelling and developing as an art form, I think they also deserve analysis in the same way as a piece of literature or a great film, to both deepen the appreciation of the game itself and to also get more out of them. I mean, unfortunately, I'm not a game developer or a game journalist. In fact, the only analytical or critical skill I can apply is that of a literary one. Yeah, great English there, Kira. So that's what I plan to do. Apply literary analysis, looking at imagery, characters, narratives, and anything else I can get my hands on, to see what the takeaway could be, to think about games in a new way. Well, a different way. But this is my first foray into this sort of analysis. So there will be mistakes, there will be missed things and misinterpreted bits and pieces. So please criticize me. And let's start thinking about games as more than just momentary distractions, but as an art form that tells amazing, compelling stories with takeaways that can change us. So, before I start freaking out, let's get started. Papers, please. This is a game that's been developed by an indie developer called Lucas Pope. Now, before I go into what my view and perspective of the game is, let's start with an introduction from the developer himself.
The communist state of Arstotzka has just ended a 6-year war with neighbouring Kolechia and reclaimed its rightful half of the border town Grustin. Your job as immigration inspector is to control the flow of people entering the Arstotzkan side of Grustin from Kolechia. Among the throngs of immigrants and visitors looking for work are hidden smugglers, spies, and terrorists. Using only the documents provided by travellers and the Ministry of Admission's primitive inspect, search and fingerprint systems, you must decide who can enter Arstotzka and who will be turned away or arrested.
You play as an unnamed breadwinner for a family of 4. You're an immigrant inspector and it's your job to process paperwork to decide whether or not people are given visas or not. You can work for a run without a single citation to your name, or overlook missing or forged documents for the sake of allowing some people into the country for their family, safety, or some extra money. Mullah mullah. You have 30 days to make through to see the various endings, if you make it that far. As you process the immigrants, you earned money to pay for rent, food, and heat for your family, as well as to upgrade your booth and maybe your living arrangements. I mean, that's Papers, Please in a nutshell. But I would also like to tell you that this game does require a lot of attention to detail, and that it will question your morality, and you may be left thinking about a couple of things, which is the hope. It can also be a little bit oppressive and dark, but it's also humorous. So be prepared with a cup of coffee or tea and get stamping. And that's kind of all I'm willing to say, lest I spoil the joys and tribulations of Papers, Please for you. So please, if you want to play this amazing game, turn this video off and glory to Arstotzka. For those that have already played the game or really don't mind spoilers, well, continue on and let me tell you all about Papers, Please. Papers, Please is a game I first played through with Rana for our Let's Play back in December. Then I bought the game and spent over 30 hours playing it and made through all of the most of the endings, and I've gotten all of the achievements. The story of Papers, Please itself isn't very complicated. Even with the very 20 endings, it doesn't significantly affect the story or the narrative per se, or the atmosphere of the game. There are 3 main paths you can take in the game. The revolutionary route with Ezek, the Glory to Arstotzka route, or the escape route, as I would call them. The game sets out the theme and the atmosphere from the very title page itself. The camo green in the title is militaristic, and the bright red of the Arstotzkan flag is based on a lot of communist, primarily Soviet, motifs and design principles. Along with the eagle with its wings raised as a symbol at the center of the flag, the immediate impression you get is that Arstotzka is a country very much based on militarist, communist politics and policies. It also invokes a feel of the Cold War and the political tension that can bring. And this is only strengthened when you get into the actual side of the game.
Congratulations! The October Labour Lottery is complete. Your name was pulled.
The game tells you. The congratulations as well as the Labour Lottery strongly indicates that you should feel grateful to be given employment. The background image shows a hand holding a hammer. It's another symbol of communism. The dark, minimalistic but militaristic music only adds to the depressing and stifling atmosphere. Its very impressions that the game gives you from the start is that there is very little personal freedom, privacy, or choice. That you, the player, and your characters are part of the cogs that turn the wheels of a country.
For immediate placement, report to the Ministry of Admission at Grestin Border Checkpoint. An apartment will be provided to you and your family in East Grestin. Expect a Class 8 dwelling. Glory to Arstotzka.
You'll notice that there is actually no choice or an option. You are told to report to the Ministry of Admission. There is no indication whether or not you're actually qualified or trained to work this position, so good luck there. The introduction also informs you that you have a family and that the government is providing housing, yay! But there is also a class system. You're given a Class 8 apartment. The expectation is also to be a patriot and work for the government as an enforcer of the rules. And this is how the game opens. If you read the About page before you played, you would also be aware that a war had taken place, but the border is now reopened. This war and the conflict between the fictional countries of Kalecha and Arstotzka will be at the center of the drama of the narrative. The division of the city of Grestin, of course, is set to remind you of East and Western Germany and, perhaps more for me, South and North Korea. The division of borders with distinct hostilities is a historical drama that most people are familiar with. It's a great use of social awareness and social consciousness as well as imagery. It sets the atmosphere. And this is intentional on behalf of the developer Lucas Pope, who himself stated that he was inspired by what may have felt like to be at the border of East and Western Germany. As the first day starts, you're given a newspaper to read, and this will form a part of your routine. The paper is for free, yay, and the expectation is that you'll read the newspaper. And this is where your story will be tracked. Some decisions that you make day to day will be reflected on the paper, others won't.
The Grestin Border Checkpoint opens at last. After 6 long years, can the Ministry of Admissions keep us safe?
The question itself already sets you at unease, and it's meant to. It tempers your excitement as you enter the game world. It also stresses your role, both empowering you with the ability to decide the fate of the individuals, but also giving you a sense of responsibility for the safety of Arstotzka itself. Let's keep focusing on imagery. The game screen, one you become infinitely familiar with, trust me, has 3 distinct sections. The top of the screen shows you a line of people to be processed. The length of the line and the number of people is supposed to add to the desperation that you can feel from the immigrants trying to get into the country, but at the same time, it also stresses you out because you realize you have so many people to process through your day. The rest shows a divided border and the guard that indicates the security concerns. The colors used here of being the dim greys adds to the atmosphere and the feel of the 1980s. The guards themselves being represented in blue is deliberate. We associate the color blue with good or with allies. Red is often seen as an indication of the enemy. But the black that represents the people in the line? Well, it's neutral. But at the same time, they're unknown. They're anonymous. The bottom shows both your counter and your desk. The right half of the desk is your workspace. The counter is where your attention is most likely to be drawn though. The security shutter gives you a sense of personal danger, that there is a threat. The muted color scheme adds a sense of austerity and government control. The day-to-day gameplay of Papers, Please is simple. You read the daily newspaper, you see some of the consequences of your decisions, you read the bulletin, which generally stresses the importance of your job and informs you of the changing of the rules. Then you examine the paperwork that the immigrants bring you for their legitimacy. Some of the paperwork will be forged, others will just be simply incorrect, yet others will just conflict with each other. As the day progresses, you'll be given more and more paperwork to deal with, and the paperwork itself will become more complicated with many more things for you to consider. You will stamp the passport, with approved or denied in the stereotypical colors of green and red. It really makes a satisfying clack with each stamp. But there is also a finality about it. When you make that decision to whether to approve them or to deny them, you have decided the fate of the individual immigrant. You call each person off the line and stamp their passports and head back to them. The loudspeaker you click to call the next person makes a gaggle of noises that sounds like a foreign language. And this is to remind you that the game is set in a foreign country, in a world that isn't really our own. As you work through the day, you realize that you have a set amount of time to work and to process the entrance. When you reach the end of the day, you realize, oh god, you have expenses to pay. The end day screen shows you how many applicants you processed, the salary you obtained as a result of your work, and the expenses you have to pay. And yes, despite it being called a salary, you get paid for each applicant you process, so it's not a set salary. The right-hand side of the screen shows you the status of your family members. You're responsible for deciding whether or not they're actually fed and have adequate heat to survive the cold day. You can always let your family go hungry or unheated to save some money, but you also learn that they can become ill and need medication. And they can die. They die. Yeah, your family members can die. Not that it happened to me or anything. No, yeah. Well, okay. Still, though, it may not be obvious to you on your first playthrough. You will notice that there is 4 Astothican passport on the left-hand side of the screen. What is interesting to note here, and we'll quickly discuss the characterization of your family at this point, is that there is kind of no characterization. You don't hear anything from your family members. They don't complain if they're not fed. You're only told that they're sick or they're hungry or they're cold. There is no characterization at all. And this allows a player to completely insert themselves into the game, and this is intentional. It's very easy to imagine that the members of the family outlined are yours. Look, I don't have a wife or a child, but it was pretty easy to put in their place like my parents and my cat instead, because I'm a sad cat lady in training. And this is intended by Lucas Pope. Not the cat part, but you know. He wanted you to feel the responsibilities of looking after your family members. And with this responsibility and the difficult amount of paperwork to deal with, the game is designed to lead you towards the very least kind of considering the bribes and the other bonuses, and maybe consider the corruption, and place yourself in the position of someone that actually has to make those sort of decisions. Now, whilst your family might not have much of a character or characterization, there are definitely some interesting characters with stories to tell in the game. So let's just kind of get to it. Let's go to day 2. It's likely at this point that you might feel a little bit overwhelmed. You have to start learning the issuing cities from like 7 or 8 different countries, focus on dates, judge the genders of the immigrants and deny them, approve them. There's all this paperwork. And so focus on your paperwork that you're likely to be very surprised when the shutter slams down. It's very likely that you really didn't notice the man that can be seen running at the top of the screen to jump over the border fence. This unknown man throws what's likely to be a bomb, and let's admit it, it's a freaking bomb, at the border guard, and he's also shot and killed, but the border guard dies too. And that's how your day ends. And it's very likely that you're really surprised by what has taken place, as I was. This is an incredibly ingenious game design. I mean, the game is made to make you focus on details. The change up in the paperwork to push you and to figure out all these sort of things, and then all of a sudden, the terrorist attack happens. And you're left questioning, as I did, whether or not you're responsible for letting in someone that you should not have. Day 3 proceeds normally. But shaken up, chances are you're paying a little bit more attention to the paperwork than you did before. You may also be feeling a little bit, of that financial stress thing from the day being cut short, and your family may not have been fed the day before. This fuels your desire to make sure you don't get the citations. And because after the first 2, you start getting fined, 5 credits, which is like 1 applicant. And you get more fines as you keep getting more citations, by the way. Not that I got any, but But eventually, through day 3, you do meet one of the favorite characters of many a player of Papers, Please. Georgi Kostava. He might brighten up your day, or he might stress you out. Georgi is one of the most interesting characters of this game. He's a drug smuggler that makes many attempts to enter Azovska, whether it be with no paperwork whatsoever, or with a passport rigged up at home, or a professionally made fake. Georgi serves an important role. He's a character that allows you to learn how to get forged passports to escape the country if that's an option you want to take. But more importantly, he provides comic relief. And his unbound optimism is it's like a little bit of sunlight in your very, very dark dystopian world. And it's actually a feat of some amazement that with a few lines of dialogue, that so many players of the game could become so fond of a rather idiotic character and his comical attempts to enter the country and the stories of his bribes to the guards, to smuggling the drugs, etc., etc. He, like Sergio and Alyssa, brings some light into your dreary workdays. But in order to keep this video from being like an hour and a half, we're not going to go and discuss Sergio and Alyssa, but their romance is so cute and... Focus, Kira. Focus. Okay. Anyway, meeting with Georgi reminds you not to pay only attention to the paperwork, but to what the characters are actually saying. And straight away in day 4, the lesson that Georgi teaches you comes into play. The day goes on until you process the person doesn't have the right paperwork, but asks you to let them through.
I am so happy that the border has opened. I will visit my son. I have not seen him in 6 years.
They tell you. And it's likely that you understand the desire. But if you let them through, they give you a token and you get a citation. If denied, they're disappointed. These tokens are your rewards for making some of the more difficult moral decisions. And there are 7 tokens in total that you can obtain, but not all of them are moral decisions. Some of them can be financial. I mean, as a gamer, collecting these tokens and obtaining the achievements is a carrot that's dangled in front of you. But at the same time, the citations and the deductions that might come, they put at risk your family. So this makes every decision that you make all the more difficult. And that's kind of the point. Papers, Please asks you to immerse yourself and make decisions that feel right to you, or to focus on the financial matters and play as a gamer normally would, depending on your playstyle, of course. I mean, let's be honest, in practical matters and talking about finance, you would have quickly realized that you have to process at least 4 people to pay the minimum rent, which is mandatory, by the way. If you don't actually pay the rent, you get a game over. and you need to process up to about 12 applicants if you want to feed and heat your family members. So all of these decisions that you need to make, moral or otherwise, have to be made in a time limit with the pressure of the finance issues hanging over you. And this, in my view, kind of allows you to act on your gut more than anything else. Once you've made a decision as to whether you want that perfect run or to go with what feels right, of course. These moral decisions highlight both your responsibility as an inspector, as well as your power over the fates of these individuals. You have rules to follow, and that is the right thing to do technically by your job description. But human-wise, what is the right thing to do? But at the same time, there's also the issue of citations. I mean, citations in themselves, though, isn't actually a threat. You receive 2 warning citations before you get fined, and that is to say that the game allows you to make either 2 mistakes for free, or to allow 2 persons into the country without risking your ability to feed your family. So you get to decide, how are you going to exercise that power? And that is a question you will need to think about. Now, day 7 begins with a newspaper line reading.
Another attack at Gruston checkpoint. Suicide bomber slips through security.
This headline in the newspaper may feel somewhat familiar to you. After all, these days we live in a world of terrorist attacks and terrorism. Yes, the game was made in 2013, and 6 years ago there was less terrorist attacks, but since 9/11, terrorism has definitely been in our consciousness, in our social consciousness and media. Once again, the game relies on our social awareness, and the news that have been in the media recently through the suicide bombings and terrorist attacks have occurred, and these all add to the atmosphere and your experience of the game. It also adds to your sense of responsibility and your immersion. It's very easy to put yourself in the place of this inspector. Through these terrorist attacks and the dangers, you also come to understand the importance of border control. But at the same time, social awareness and politics in the modern world also leaves you questioning the value of such safety versus fundamentals to the rights of privacy and human rights and the plight of refugees. The game mechanics of citations and the pressure of providing for your family makes you prioritize and compromise on your beliefs. And chances are, as gamers, we've been conditioned to play games to accumulate money and achievements, and it's likely that you'll play through the game without questioning yourself too much. You'll accept the game mechanics and use them ruthlessly without question. It might only be later that you start to question yourself. So, let's actually start looking at the endings and the stories that they present. Let's start with Isaac, who introduces themselves on day 8. So, you're visited by a person in a robe and an odd symbol rather than a face. The robe that they're wearing is blue-green, a color that is indicative of friend or ally. Remember this. They hand you a blank piece of paper with a symbol and a word. Isaac. The back of the piece of paper has a name, Corman Drax. They don't actually say anything other than...
The order awaits.
The mysterious nature of this individual is intentional. Like the masks worn by Anonymous, this is designed to show that anyone can be a member of Isaac. The intrigue is supposed to draw you in, and like all good mystery, it keeps you turning the pages, or keeps you clicking, until you know what the end is going to be. In this case, the intrigue adds to your day-to-day movement of the paperwork, and it's likely that the mysterious order may draw you into following the Isaac path the first time around. In fact, the Steam achievements indicate that 12.3% of the players with Papers, Please on Steam obtained an achievement called Hide Rifle, which is obtained by acting under one of the last actions that Isaac asks of you, as opposed to Glory to Stotska being given to only 7.3% of the players, which asks you to ignore all Isaac requests. So, given the oppressive nature of the policies that you're asked to enforce and the dystopian feel of the world and the country itself, it's unlikely that you feel aligned with the militarist, communist atmosphere created by Stotska, and as a gamer used to being a hero, you may be drawn to the idea of being a revolutionary hero. And this path adds leads you to work actively against the rules set by a Stotskan government to allow the agents of Azek into the country to weed out corruption and greed from the ranks of the government through yet more terrorist attacks. You're asked to poison an assassination target and also to sacrifice yourself in order to take out another target. If you do so, you get the hide rifle ending. If you don't, or you restart the day like I did, then you can join the ranks of Azek and leave your post to work to bring down the government. Now, this path should make you feel like a hero of a revolution. It doesn't, at least not to me. The border is torn down and Azek is in place, but despite this, you're given orders. You're yet again a cog in the wheel, this time just for the revolution and not the government. Between the interesting ciphers, secrets, and intrigue, this is an interesting path to take. And this is a path that might also feel canonical to the game. But why? I mean, let's look at the other option. The glorious Stotskan ending. I mean, this one requires you to ignore all requests from Azek. Simple enough. But the characters that represent the government and the happenings that lead you to question the rightness of the government's path. And this is where the problem comes in. Let's start with Dimitri, your boss and the face of the government that you're given to deal with. You'll meet him on day 10, 20, and 30. The man is dressed in lush red colors. The color is both indicative of him being a threat, as well as his position. The other Stotskan government persons you deal with, which is mostly guards, another cog to the wheel, mean they're all dressed in blue, a color of an ally. But this man, your boss, is a stark contrast. As a gamer, we're trained to associate this color of red with enemies, with threats, with exploding barrels and fire and blood and yeah, all the things that are kind of bad. This color is also heavily associated with communism, as can be seen in the flags of the USSR and the People's Republic of China, two heavily authoritarian states. The man counts how many citations you may or may not have received and gives you a plaque stating sufficiency if you incur citations, and excellence for those doing that perfect run. You'll note that he doesn't actually introduce himself. You'll learn later that his name is Dimitri, but he doesn't deign to introduce himself to you, and this is deliberate. Until he is more characterized with a name, the game invites you to see him as the face of the government that is overseeing you, one without personality, a nameless overseer that oppresses and assesses you. When he returns on day 20, he again assesses you, and if you dare to decorate your booth with a painting from your son or a soccer team banner, then Dimitri promptly informs you that your pay will be deducted for the breach of policy. Once again, there is a sense of government control and lack of individuality. You're not allowed to express yourself. You're a cog, just a number. And despite your responsibilities and empowerment, you're to follow the rules created by the government, even if they don't follow those rules for themselves.
Now, I have an old friend coming through. Approve her entry. I do not want to hear of any trouble for her.
The abuse of power is obvious. You, as an inspector working a booth, is given orders and expected to obey. Of course, you as a player does not have to. You can make the decision to not allow in Dimitri's friend and instead embarrass him and get him really worked up on a later visit. But the expectation is to obey without question in this communist, militaristic society that you're in. And when you find that Dimitri's friend, of course, is a lady friend, that with a sigh informs you that she wishes Dimitri would tire quickly, then it's more the more obvious to you that his abuse of power is for personal gratification, shall we say, then the more merged your view of the government will be. It's a brilliant way that the developer shows you the hypocrisy that is inherent in Astotska and its government. It's just a flippant way that the government policies change day to day. The other representative of the government, besides the guards, who are once again cogs in the wheel like yourselves, arrives on day 12. A man dressed in black with a semi-militaristic garb that sets you to remind the Gestapo starts to question you.
You are healthy, yes? I have just few questions for you.
He says as he hands you a card with his name, M. Vonal, and tells us that he's from the Ministry of Information. Given that on the day that he comes, you have 2 pieces of paper from Azek and may or may not have taken some action to assist the revolution, you may feel a little bit worried at this investigation.
There was a problem at Metro last night. Maybe you read about it in paper. It's very big news. We think it is not accident. We think it is caused by suspicious group. We think some members passed through this checkpoint. So we come to talk to you. Have you seen anything like this?
He says as he hands us a piece of paper with the ethics symbol drawn on it. The choice is now yours. Do you own up to the fact that you've been contacted with the organization or not? If you do and you hand him one of the cipher pages, the game promptly ends with your incarceration and you're given an achievement entitled Too Honest. However, given that you were too honest, and you handed over the incriminating piece of evidence under the belief that you're doing the right thing and receive a game over screen, it's easy enough to restart the game from the very same day. That is, the game teaches you that there's no value in honesty. Not in this country. In that in order to survive, you need to be at times dishonest. Whether it's to obtain benefits through detaining people, or through taking bribes, or by other nefarious means. As you deal with these sort of characters, you feel more oppressed and you worry about the path that Azotska is heading down. You're reminded of other countries that have taken these sort of oppressive rules and have become tyrannical and fascist. The paperwork itself also becomes more tyrannical. Each immigrant is now required to bring vaccination papers. They're required to declare their height and weight and their physical traits. You judge the way that people look and you question their gender. You're required to. And you're ordered to start seizing Azotskan passports. And this should really worry you. But still, you have a job to do. You're tasked to secure the border, with tranquilizer darts if required. You're empowered to protect the border and you do so until the last terrorist attack happens on day 31. If you stay in Azotska and don't participate in the revolution, you're given the Glory to Azotska ending, and you're informed that the border will reopen, you can return to work in January, and Azotska continues its oppressive militaristic state. This ending isn't very satisfying, not in my view. This ending worries me. We have no passports. We can't leave the country. The government rules are oppressive and they personally affect you. Your sister's arrested, you don't know why, but you also have to adopt your niece if you want to. These sort of incidents with the government control and corruption that's displayed by Dimitri and Vonal, they had been wondering just how far the Azotskan government was going to go. Will they slip further down the road of fascism and oppressive rule? Or will the downfall of Ezik and lessening of terrorist attacks maybe lead them to a relaxation of some of these rules? Your future is uncertain. But there is a third option. And day 29 brings you the answer. You can choose to escape Azotska by going to Briston. And through the next couple of days, Georgia will come and provide you with details on how to escape the country by obtaining a Briston passports and paying 25 credits for each family member you wish to take with you. So if you had to take your niece as well as the rest of your family members, you need 6 passports and 150 credits to get the passports forged, aka changed, and also to obtain entry passes into a Briston. And the plight that you face here kind of is obvious. I mean, once your freedoms are restricted, the fear should be obvious to you. That you might be trapped in this country that will persecute its own citizens. In a country that can become more harsh and oppressive and get worse and worse as time goes on. The next few days, if you choose this option, will be a little bit stressful. Because you have to balance citations for taking the passports that you shouldn't be taking, and also violating the human rights of those people you're taking the passports from, as well as the funds that you need to collect in order to make your escape. My first playthrough, this was made a little bit easier for me and Rana because our mother-in-law and uncle died. Yeah, we weren't very good at this. Though, not intentional, their death and not taking the niece, we were horrible, meant that we had less passports and money required to make the escape, and So we didn't have to actually choose if we had to leave anyone behind, etc., etc. But you may have to. And not knowing the rest of the game, we took this route, and we felt like this was the only option. That we were doing what we could to save ourselves from this fascist country. And this is intentional. The quickly moving policies and changes kind of might give you hope that the changes might roll back and you might get your passports back. But at the same time, if you've also been working with ASIC, or you've been feeling that the government is a bit oppressive and you're not very happy with their rules, then the fact that you have to face an investigation on day 31 may start to worry you as well. But this ending is important, and I think this should be the canonical ending of the game, because this actually puts you on the other side of the table. Rather than you being the inspector who decided on the fate of the individuals that came before you, you are now the immigrant, handing over your passports to the Bristol immigration inspector and hoping for the best. They demand all of your passports and the entry passes. Then you hear ka-chunk, 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 with pauses and buttons you have to press to continue. And the tension is really heavy. For the first time, you learn what it must have felt like to be that immigrant waiting for your decision as you go through the paperwork. Because just as they were worried about being denied and not being able to see their family members or to save their lives, you're now worrying what's going to happen if you do get denied. You might have to go back to a country that might be dangerous for you now, or detained, just as you've detained all of the others for having forged passports. In the end though, you are welcomed into Bristol. The relief you feel might have been the same for those that you led into the country. This is ingenious. This is a brilliant ending. Because you see both sides, you experience both sides. It puts you in the shoes of the immigrant. It's a full circle. And the repetition and the delays of those ka-chinks, ka-chinks, ka-chinks is just beautifully done. Especially with the imagery of facing that little hall of the shutter as the screen reads of Bristol immigration is powerful. And it really adds to that trepidation that you might feel. It's extremely well done. Genius. Now, let's get to the thinking points. Let's get to the takeaways, shall we? There are a couple of things that Papers, Please makes you think about. And this is one of the reasons why I love this game. Because a piece of art in any form should make you think, should make you reflect, should have an impact on you. And Papers, Please certainly does. All of the moral decisions that you make makes you question yourself. Some of the decisions you make might have been based on finance. Did you take bribes? Did you detain people that you shouldn't have? Or you could have just let go for the bonuses? Did you make all of the right decisions? How do you know? The game doesn't judge. So you are left to judge. And that, in my view, is incredibly a powerful impact. Unlike having those sort of games where there is a karma system where the game judges you, Papers, Please doesn't have that. All you get at the end of the game is a screen that outlines how many people you've processed, how many people you allowed in, how many people you denied, and how many people you detained, how many credits you earned. But there is at no point that the game says you are a great inspector, or you're a greater human being, or you're a terrible inspector. The game doesn't judge. It is up to you to look at yourself, the decisions you've made, and judge yourself. But that's not what Papers, Please is, only about. Besides that takeaway and the thoughts that you need to have about yourself and what you prioritize, the game is also about political oppression, of living in that kind of society. The game makes you reflect about the world that you live in and the plight of the people that may have just been newspaper headlines. In fact, social awareness and social consciousness is what gives the game its full impact. If you're aware of things that's happened in the world in the last decade or so, and have currently been, happening in the world even still, the game will make you question things in a way that is truly ingenious. The frequent terrorist attacks, the refugees, the health concerns with the polio outbreak, the questions about privacy with the full X-ray scans and violation of human rights with the detain mechanics. All of these are designed to make you think. The game has a great deal of human decisions. The game frequently gives you opportunities to break the rules that you're required to enforce, to allow people into the country for their safety, health, or for bribes, and the game also gives you opportunities to participate in terrorist activities. Given this, it's most likely that most players, when they first play the game, will ignore your gamer instinct to get the higher score or the achievements, blah blah blah, and find yourself breaking the rules frequently to follow your heart. Most of the time, these actions will be rewarded with tokens and achievements or extra money. Even otherwise, you might still feel better about this dystopic world. It also becomes an amazingly immersive experience. But even with that in mind, the game still forces you to make some uncomfortable decisions and follow rules that you may not agree with. This for me was most prevalent when it came to the question of gender. When a character has a stereotypically male or stereotypically female appearance, but their paperwork states otherwise, you're required to point out this discrepancy. Whether or not this is an indication of the passport being a forgery, you're forced to violate their rights to privacy, conduct an X-ray scan to check their gender. If you let the character pass without doing so, you get a citation. If the individual identifies as a different gender to the one that they appear to according to the X-ray, you have to either deny their visas or detain them. Politically, the question of transgender rights is a topic that's been around for some time, and it's a hot topic in many countries. My personal views aside, this is a question that you may have to lull over for some time. What must it feel like to have your privacy and your very identity questioned? Regardless of your personal views, you'll most likely find that in order to progress with the game, that you'll start making snap decisions on people based on their appearance and violate their human rights in order to earn credits. And the same goes for the issue of terrorism. If you believe that EZIC is indeed the collection terrorists, and even if not, they're conducting terrorist attacks in Latotska, you wonder whether or not weeding out corruption, as they say, from the government is worth the threat of terrorism and the dangers that it provides to civilians. Alright, let's get a little controversial here. Now, I'm by no means condoning the violent terrorist attacks by any means. In fact, I'm very much a flowers and make love instead of war kind of person. But I am talking about beliefs. Terrorism is usually motivated by strong beliefs in the rights of a certain nation group or a religious group. Technically, the Spring Revolution of Egypt, for example, could be seen as a terrorist activity in the way that it was a demonstration and protest against the government of the day. But these actions by the large percentage of the population were seen as they were fighting for the right for their democracy, for human rights, and fighting against the brutal rule of Mubarak. And their actions and entailed activities such as burning over 60 police stations and resulting in thousands of deaths weren't seen as terrorist attacks in the world's view. The change of government thereafter was seen as a triumph for democracy and human rights. And that is undeniably a link between the views that are working against the government and politics thereof, often result in casualties of individuals that work for the government, such as soldiers and police officers, even if they may not share such beliefs or politics. Just like you, as you were the immigration inspector enforcing the governmental rules that you may have disagreed with, the police officers and the soldiers and the bureaucrats, whatever, that you deal with day to day, they may not agree with the policies that they have to enforce, but it is their job and duty to do so. So let's bring it back to Papers, Please. As the collection of terrorist attacks in an attempt to free the border town and bring back the country, a sympathetic cause? What about ASIC and their attempts to undermine the government? Are their mysterious motivations justified? Are the sacrifices of the lives of the guards worth it? How will the history consider both of these causes? And that is up to you to decide. But there is another thought to consider when it comes to terrorist attacks. Since 9/11, we have become familiar with terrorist attacks. More and more they're in our headlines. Aside from the terrorist attacks, there's also mass shootings. And these are fast becoming everyday threat that we learn to live with, just as you do in game. The first terrorist attack catches you off guard, and then eventually it just becomes another occurrence to deal with. It becomes an annoyance that cuts your day off short so you can't earn more credits. As we have learned to do in real life, we acclimatize to terrorist threats. Just as we do when we go to the theatre, concerts, or get on planes. Lucas Pope, when discussing Papers, Please in an interview with On Pause in 2013, stated that the idea of the game came to him over the years of international travel and going through the inspection process. He stated that he wanted to make a game that captures the power of the inspector, the rigmarole of the actual inspection, and the tension of the immigrants. And when questioned about why he set the game in a dystopian background, he stated, "It is fascinating to me how bureaucracy can come out bad, even when the individual actors have no evil will." And that is the crux of it right here. You are the cog of a wheel in the Stotskan government as you play the role of the inspector. You're tasked to enforce rules, and in order to do so, you may have to do certain things that you don't agree with. And that in itself is both a way for the player to forgive themselves for the harsh decisions that they make, because it's the game making you do it, but it also makes you question and also consider the individuals enforcing the rules that you may not agree with. Like the coppers, the soldiers, the bureaucrats that may have been, denying your license or failing you on your driving test. Papers, Please isn't an easygoing game. It's not just an immigration inspector simulator. It's a game that makes you think, that questions your morals, it makes you think about consequences. Each decision you make has a flip side. Multiple playthroughs of the game showed me that there are various reactions the game has to every decision you make. Detain the pimp, you destroy a people smuggling ring. Allow him through, dancers are found dead. React slowly to a terrorist attack, more guards die. You die. I mean, this makes the game all the more powerful because it doesn't judge you. There is no karma system. It's up to you to decide whether you're satisfied with the decisions you made, to get your own takeaways, your own thinking points. Personally, the game made me think about the plight of refugees, about whether or not the safety and security of the country is worth the violation of human rights and privacy, and about how much government oversight I was actually willing to deal with. Of course, you can play Papers, Please without thinking of any of these things. You can simply enjoy the paperwork and the stamping, which is, by the way, very satisfying. But I would suggest that you do think about things a little bit more. To think about the decisions. Think about the plight and hope of the characters as you deny them or approve them. You will get much more out of the game this way. You will become more immersive. And you will become an amazing interactive experience rather than just a momentary distraction of paperwork hell. So, I hope you enjoyed this rather long and crazy analysis of a game. And as always, I hope you have a lovely, lovely day. Mwah!